I'm David Schuster. A lot of us are all too familiar with what social media has done to journalism, politics, public policy, like how to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. But there's a terrific new book out on what social media and the internet have done to history. It is by Jason Steinhauser. He's an author, global fellow at the Wilson Center. The name of his book is History Disrupted: How Social Media and the World Wide Web Have Changed the Past. This book has become a #1 bestseller on Amazon rave reviews, and this is an academic book, which makes it even more amazing. Jason, good of you to join us. First of all, what prompted you to do this book?
Well, actually, it's exactly what you just said. There have been so many studies and conversations about how social media has affected our politics, affected journalism, affected public health, but no one had really looked at or analyzed how social media and the web have changed history and changed what we know about the past. And so the more I looked into it, the more I realized that there was an important book here to write.
And it sounds like the more you looked into it, the more troubling it became.
Yeah, one of the things I learned as I researched this book is that even though we have so much history in the public domain on social media and in the news media and on the web, it actually isn't improving our understanding of history all that much. In fact, what it's doing, I argue in the book, is just embedding the values of the social web deeper into our lives.
So that would tend to a lot of people to suggest that things become much more abbreviated, simplified, and perhaps things that are false, conspiracy theories, then get embedded and become a place where people can go and say, aha, well, of course, Pearl Harbor was a false flag because I found it here on the web.
Yeah, the book does talk about misinformation and disinformation. That's an aspect of the book, but the book is really set up to be this contrast in values. And one of the things I write in the book is that history is the professional discipline of history, the practice of history is a very time-consuming, labor-intensive, always evolving intellectual endeavor. And so to communicate history online involves taking that endeavor and transposing it into a social web which promises to be instantly gratifying, to give you answers right away, which is largely user-centric as opposed to expert-centric. And so this creates a lot of challenges for communicating history, particularly professional history. And as I argue in the book, what it does is it ultimately changes what we think about history because it shifts it from being something that is expert-centric to user-centric, something that is always evolving to something that is instantly gratifying. And that is one of the outcomes of all this that I think has been understudied and underappreciated.
A lot of us who are familiar with the academic world understand that there's a certain peer review process. And if you publish a book in political science or history, there are other history experts who are there to weigh in on the strengths and weaknesses of the argument. But it sounds like in this particular case now, well, that is sort of being torn apart.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not a nostalgic for the old days of academia where only people like me were allowed to participate in the creation of new knowledge. I think some of the gatekeeping has rightfully come down and allowed more diverse voices into the conversation. But on the flip side of that, those mechanisms also allow nefarious actors and people with maybe not the most honest agendas to introduce historical narratives into the conversation and to crowdsource them into becoming popularized and to becoming accepted. And I talk about this in the book that, crowdsourcing has its positives, but it also has its negatives. And there are many aspects and many instances where far-right nationalist groups or disinformation agents have crowdsourced history into the public sphere, and it's sort of taken on a life of its own and become accepted as truth.
That shape of history, and given the crowdsourcing and far-right groups that you mentioned, is it predominantly or is it clearly involving, say, memories of fascism or Nazism in World War II and sort of what was happening then and what people understand it now?
It's really interesting because the more I looked at this, the more I saw these patterns happening across platforms and across different subject matters. So it's not just one or two issues that maybe stand out at the top of our minds, right? This is a repeated mechanism by which hostile actors or people with nefarious agendas crowdsource information on various platforms about history, and then eventually it bubbles up into our news feeds. And because it's resting alongside all this other information by academics and journalists and others, it's really hard for the average consumer to distinguish one from the other. And so it ends up being much more confusing than anything else, which is why I argue at the end of the book that actually we're not really improving our understanding of history at all through this environment. In fact, we may be even making it worse.
Jason, give us one of your favorite examples from the book in terms of this stuff bubbling up into the mainstream, into news feeds that was essentially crowdsourced and maybe incorrect.
Well, one of the things I talk about in the books, I talk about Wikipedia and I talk about the crowdsourced past and how that works. And what was interesting about Wikipedia is I actually found an example where crowdsourcing actually prevented truthful information or accurate information from entering the public sphere. There was a historian who was an expert on the Haymarket riot in 1886 in Chicago, and he tried to update the Wikipedia page to include his scholarship, and the crowd told him no, he couldn't update it because his singular voice should not overrule the voice of the crowd. So we oftentimes think about crowdsourcing and the way that it bubbles up information into our feeds, but also crowdsourcing can have the opposite effect. It can keep factual information from ever reaching our eyes. That was kind of a surprising story for me, and I think it's not something we always think about when we think about these mechanisms that the web has engendered.
So what did this historian about the Haymarket riot in 1896, what did he do to deal with this?
Well, he actually tried 3 times to update his Wikipedia page, the Wikipedia page, and was rejected all 3 times under the same logic. And eventually he wrote an op-ed about this, which was published, I believe in the Chronicle of Higher Education or Inside Higher Ed. And eventually over time, I think he was able to make improvements to the page as his scholarship became more widely known and widely accepted. But it sort of points to this idea of how the crowdsourcing mechanisms can have positive effects, but they can also have negative effects. They can raise disinformation to our eyes, but they can also prevent factual information from ever reaching our eyes.
I also wonder if it gets to, in the world of political science, there's this whole sort of theory that, well, things happen not just because of individual actors, but because of institutions and culture. And yet on the internet, social media is so much sort of celebrity driven, it's individual driven. And to me, it suggests that maybe that as people are sort of changing history, they're looking more at the celebrities in history and discounting some of the things that in the past have been crucial in terms of institutional factors that weigh in and contribute to how history is shaped.
Yeah, what's interesting is one of the things I look at in the book is I look at the incentives for creating content online and how those incentives create and reward different types of historical information, right? And one of the incentives I take a hard look at is this incentive of virality. The ability to send something viral through networks and how we reward that with fame, with attention, with money, with book contracts. And what that does in the case of history is it incentivizes people to find ways to send history content viral through networks, even if that content isn't accurate. And I look at the example of History in Pics, which is this viral history account that has about 4 million followers on Twitter. And basically what they did is they devised a formula to send history content viral through networks. And that virality got them fame and attention and public acclaim, got them written up in all kinds of media organizations. But there was a lot of problems with the accuracy of that account. And meanwhile, to your point, as you're saying, there are scholars and academics who are doing laborious work in the archives and producing historical content every year that is accurate and fact-based and rigorously researched. And that content never sees the light of day because the incentives on social media don't reward it.
There's been an argument from the crowdsourcing groups that historians have tended to be biased, have tended to be of a certain gender and racial persuasion, and therefore maybe it's a good thing that there's more crowdsourcing in terms of understanding history. What's the response?
Well, listen, I think diversity is crucial to telling a story of the past, whether it be the American past or any past. And so the more voices and the more diverse voices that can be at the table in a production of historical knowledge, I think that's a good thing. And I appreciate the calls for diversity. And I think it's great that the history profession is looking less and less like me and more like a diverse group of people that this country represents. On the flip side of that, what you get though is you get this distrust in institutions that you've talked about. And throughout the book, I did a lot of research and heard from a lot of people about how people do not trust academia, they do not trust traditional historical institutions. And a lot of that has been engendered by the web. So we have to find a balance where we can still have trust in our institutions and trust in those who do this type of evidence-based research that is time-consuming and laborious to produce, and that produces what we believe to be accurate representations of the past, while still making the seat at the table big enough so that everyone can participate in the process and lots of diverse voices can be heard.
So given the challenges now, what is the answer? What is the solution to finding that balance in order to both protect the more voices who want to be part of the narration of history, but also protecting the academic rigor and expertise of people who are doing the laborious work?
Yeah, well, these are really challenging questions that I grapple with in the book. I don't have all the answers, but one of my suggestions is I've actually created something called the History Communication Institute. And I envision this institute being a forum where we can have these types of conversations and bring diverse stakeholders to the table to confront these issues, because there are a lot of headwinds facing professional history. As you've probably heard, history enrollments have been plummeting. People taking history classes have been plummeting. Historians' jobs are being cut left and right. And a lot of that has been engendered by the web and the forces that the web has unleashed. So what I want to do through the History Communication Institute is use the ideas in the book as a leaping off point to talk about how we can diversify the stories and the profession and also adapt to the changing communications environment that we're in.
Even though fewer people are taking history classes, it does seem there's something here given just how successful your book has been. I mean, people care about history. Were you surprised by the response, and what do you attribute it to? Other than great writing and great research and all that you've done, but just the genre seems to have really grabbed people.
Well, I think that this book touches on a number of subjects that people care about. It touches on social media and the web, which obviously is playing a huge role in our lives. It's touching on politics and activism and disinformation, all of which are crucial issues right now. And to your point, I think there are actually a lot of people who care about history and find history interesting. They maybe just haven't enjoyed the way history has been taught or communicated in the past, which is some of the reason why this e-history online succeeds. So I think my book has touched into a lot of these things, and maybe this can be the beginning of a new phase in history communication that gets more people excited about studying the past.
Well, the reviews are simply terrific. A History Disrupted: How Social Media and the World Wide Web Have Changed the Past. It was written by Jason Steinhauser, an author and global fellow at the Wilson Center. Jason, thanks for doing this. We appreciate it, and good to have you on.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
A computer engineer for Congress. Well, everybody, welcome back to the conversation. The first primary of the 2022 cycle starts on next week, March the 1st. Texas has its primary, and there are 2 additional congressional seats in Texas as a result of the census. There's a brand new district for what is known as Texas's 37th congressional district, and there's a couple of fascinating candidates. There is Lloyd Doggett, who was the incumbent in the 35th congressional district. That district has changed, and he's being challenged by Donna Iman. She is not a politician. She is an engineer who says that she solves large-scale problems. She was also endorsed in her last congressional run 2 years ago by Bernie Sanders. Donna, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it.
So tell me a little bit about this race. It's next week. How you doing?
I'm doing great. We are, executing on the program that we wanted to, which is taking our message directly to the voters. And we're hopefully getting the job done. We're working every single day around the clock, and it's a tough race, but I think we're going to get there.
You're a tried and true progressive, as I said, endorsed by Bernie Sanders when you ran in 2020. You support healthcare for all, education for all, immigration reform, pathway to citizenship. What would be the priority out of all of this if you get elected?
Well, the biggest challenge here in Austin, Texas, is we just became the 11th largest city in the entire country. And the cost of living is a huge challenge. It's driving out people on fixed incomes, people like school teachers, social workers, people who work in the nonprofit sector that have worked their entire lives, done everything correctly, and now aren't able to, afford to live in what was one of the most affordable cities in the entire country. So my highest priority, because Texas has the most number of people without any health insurance and the most number of people without any health care. And the reason I make that distinction, as you know, is having health insurance doesn't guarantee that you'll be able to see a doctor. So my number one priority, if I get to Congress, is to lower the cost of healthcare with single payer Medicare for all. And I have some very specific solutions that would actually accelerate that and bring it to the American people and cover every single person in our country. And that is the biggest part of my platform, my number one priority. But my number two priority goes right along with it, which is the cost of education. Over the last several decades, the cost of education has gone up 3,000%. This is a huge problem, not just for our next generation, but for the, our entire country's viability and the ability to stay on the cutting edge of technology and leadership in this entire world.
As I said, Lloyd Doggett, who is the congressman for the 35th congressional district, he's been in Congress since the 1990s. He seemed to support Medicare for all recently, but it also appeared that he was at first sort of reluctant. Is the argument that he's not a true progressive, that he's not progressive enough?
I think the American people are looking at, those two big things that I talked about, the cost of healthcare and the cost of education. And they're looking at Congress right now and saying, look, the Build Back Better bill, right, was gutted, not just before it went to the Senate, in the House. They took out 2-year tuition-free community college. They removed the ability to negotiate prescription drugs, which is one of the most popular things in the entire country. Child tax credits, axed, boom, completely gone, right? And some of these were done in the House, not in the Senate. This argument that we can't get things done because we have 2 senators that are holding up our entire agenda for the American people, the bottom 50% of the American people, Democrats that came out in 2020, they did it with the hopes that with a majority in the House, even with a slim majority in the Senate and with the White House, that these basic economic challenges that Americans are facing would be addressed. They're not. What I believe is we need people in Congress that have the competency to organize Congress, bring people on board with data and facts, and figure out strategically how to bring the Senate on board with the agenda for the American people. Now, I have a background in technology, as you know, in the Austin tech industry, 18-year career bringing very, very successful products to market. And I want to take my experience and expertise to Congress and ensure that we deliver for the American people.
A lot of those members of Congress, though, do not have that sort of background and would not perhaps have the same sort of level of understanding to be charitable about data and even sometimes basic facts. Does it make it more difficult?
Make it more difficult as in?
Well, I mean, if elected, you'd be dealing with a lot of members of Congress who aren't necessarily computer engineers, and some of them who don't seem to, at least particularly Republicans, don't seem to value data and education and academic success. So, and that may reflect sort of society as a whole right now.
Yes, I see what you're saying now. I think the American people are some of the smartest people in the entire world. We need to take our agenda, our data, and our solutions directly to the American people and let the American people put the pressure on Congress to get things done. Right now, I believe one of the biggest challenges in mainstream media is that we are not bringing the facts and data. For example, how many times have you heard that we are actually overpaying for healthcare by almost $2 trillion annually? Do we hear that on, our mainstream media on a daily basis, right? While leaving out millions of people. We need to bring this message to the American people. How many times do we hear that we have a lack of primary care physicians in our country, that we have over 90,000 physicians that were trained and educated outside of the United States that are trying to fill that gap right now? So these are some of the challenges that we have to address. I have a really great solution for all of these, scaling the healthcare infrastructure with more physicians and more nurses, thus lowering the cost of healthcare. And that is the message we need to bring to the American people. I think that we can get this done. I'm hopeful. That's why I'm working here to get our message to Texans.
You took a message to Texans back in 2020. You were the Democratic nominee for the 31st Congressional District. What'd you learn from that campaign?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but not only did we have the highest voter turnout in the history of the district, we came in #1 in Williamson County, that is Northwest Austin and its suburbs, in all of Texas. #1 in voter turnout among the top 25 most populated counties. You don't come in #1 by chance. You do it because you did the work. And the way we did it is we took our message to 50,000 doors in suburbia. Now, if you live in Texas, you know that the homes are huge and they're sometimes 75 to 100 feet apart each. So getting that accomplished is a huge deal. What we learned is if you can take your message and the message is accurate, which we believe we have the right message for the American people, then you can absolutely get out the vote. And that's how you win Texas. That's how we take back Texas.
And when you compete in a brand new congressional district, as this one is, the 37th congressional district, are there additional challenges? Because you're essentially over, part of it was in the 31st district, part of it was in the 31st. You've got the sort of new boundaries. What does that do in terms of just the political strategy?
It's a huge uphill battle. In fact, one of the challenges with this district, it is actually gerrymandered heavily blue, which means it's called what's known as a sink district. They take all the Democrats, and there's a lot of them in Austin, Texas, and they pack them all into one district, which means in the primary election, it is a real difficulty in reaching so many Democrats with so little budget. And I'm running a grassroots campaign. 100% of every single contribution to my campaign in this election came from individual small contributors, right? So this is a very difficult task, and how to use a very small amount of budget and reach over 100,000 Democrats that have voted in a Democratic primary.
The headwinds, at least nationally, seem to be against Democrats. A lot of indications that if the election were held, the midterm general election were held today, Democrats would probably lose the House, probably lose the Senate. Given all of that, does it make it more difficult to try to sell progressive ideas as opposed to doing what a lot of establishment Democrats want the candidates to do, and that is pivot back towards the center?
No, actually, our message every single time, it doesn't matter who they are, where on the spectrum they are, regardless of whether, they're in the center, left, right. When I tell people we're being price gouged for healthcare, everybody agrees, because everybody has seen their hospital bills, their emergency room bills, and their doctor's bills, right? They can see it doesn't make absolutely sense what we're paying. They can see that we are paying sometimes 10 times more for the same prescription drug as sold anywhere else in the world, that we're subsidizing the entire world's pharmaceuticals. And the American people need to know that the majority of this pharmaceutical research and development was done with public money in universities, with funds that were available because of the working people of the United States. It's the wealth that we created that funded all this research and development. And it is absolutely necessary that we are able to negotiate these prices down to what they should be. So we're having no issues here. Our message is on point. Voters love our message. We just need to get it to them, and that's the toughest part. If we can get our message to voters, I'm 100% confident that we've got this.
One of the main news stories right now as we head into the March 1st primary is a foreign policy challenge, and that is Russia's invasion of part of the Ukraine. They're occupying 2 regions in eastern Ukraine. Do you have a sense about how the Biden administration is doing? Should the Biden administration be doing anything differently?
Well, we should be exploring every single diplomatic effort that is absolutely possible before we make any decision on this. And we should ensure that we use every peaceful method, economic incentives to solve this challenge that we're seeing there. I don't have all the details of what they're doing right now. It seems a little bit murky, but what I would be very clear about is that the United States and we as Americans absolutely should not engage in any kind of conflict there unless it is very specific, and it is specifically around economic incentives to do it diplomatically, to solve it diplomatically. I'm an anti-war candidate, and I do not support any kind of conflict that we go in as the United States.
Finally, Donna, are there any other computer engineers that serve in Congress right now that you know of?
I think there may be 1 or 2 electrical engineers, in Congress, especially on and maybe on the GOP side. I'm not aware of an electrical and computer engineer with my background in Congress right now. There very well could be, but if you know anybody, let me know.
Well, I know that a lot of folks in West Lafayette, Indiana, the Purdue University where you went to school, will be very proud to see you. Good luck in your race next week. The primary is March the 1st. This is Donna Imam. She is the one of the Democrats running in the primary for Texas's 37th congressional district. The primary is March the 1st. Here are some contacts for how you can help out Donna if you want to. Donna, good of you to join us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on.
You got it. And that'll do it for this edition of The Conversation. On behalf of Asher Cofield, Gina Kim, and Craig Lowry, I'm David Schuster. Thanks for watching.
You know, to me from Jank, it'll just be me, you, Jesus, Ben, and maybe Michael. And we're like, okay, cool. I can do that every week. As you can see, me, Jesus, Ben.
When you make the order, it says, don't exceed $20.01. So I'll just order literally anything to get it as close to that as I possibly can.
I'm sorry that I ordered $45 worth of food and got an email saying, sir, would you like to rethink that? And I go, what are you talking about?
I was in hell. I was just like, oh my God, the theater's empty, nobody's here. Everyone on screen keeps f***ing cursing. Why did I let this happen? And the whole thing looks like it was shot through a glass of milk. My mom's gonna be so mad.
If you're looking for a heart attack, the short way, baby.
Wrong! I did put mayonnaise on it. I'm the most in shape, overweight person you'll find.
That's right.
He was like, why didn't you answer my call? I called you 39 times.
Yuck. But what makes you stop right before 40? You know, what makes you say, nah, man, I ain't doing that no more. I'm cool.
And I called you back on the air. And I was like, okay, Kevin Smith, big shot. What the f***? You said you'd come on and you didn't come on.
I'm sure I took that very well.
Yeah, you did. You called me back the next day and said, I thought it was 7 a.m. There's now deep fake porn. I don't know if you guys have heard of this.
Heard of it? I just had some in the car.
I'll tell you who I'm not f***ing, Ben Mankiewicz. Have you guys ever felt that?
Not ever.
And now it's just the three of us.
This is the intimate hour.
By the way, the last half hour of this, we're not even rolling.
Fair enough.
Easily.
See, I watch movies.
I'm done with both of you.
Once Greg starts laughing, I can't stop. And I was just gonna ask you about getting high.
Snoogans, Snoochie Boochies.
And members, of course, you can get the whole damn thing. TYT.com, join, and free trial. I'm old school with the old folks.
Good
John, come back!
Field goal here. It's time to switch to beer.
Oh, man.
Oh, God.
Do your best.
He's a little like... Let's go!
Oh. No one's happy now.
Give him another try.
Oh!
Wow. This is the weirdest game.
I'm Brett. I would like to refer to this segment as the Do I Still Have This Talent show. So I want to see if I can play harmonica without my hands. I don't know why I have that. Nothing's gonna be more impressive than that. I can also spin a basketball on my finger. While drinking. I'm gonna spin a basketball on my finger while drinking apple juice. You can do this, dude. It's also flat. I don't know if that helps or hurts. And it seems to be somewhat wobbly. Ta-da! Nope, I don't know how to do this one. This one's a fail. Nope. Oh God, I'm so mad.
Young Turks, Cenk Uygur Kasparian with you guys. Look, it's a somber day. Nonetheless, I'm in a mood. And so I will make light of certain things that should not be made light of. So you have that to look forward to, okay? And then we'll get very serious. And the good news is we're going to explain to you exactly why we're actually not cracking down on Russia. And that's a super interesting story we're gonna get to very soon. It turns out it has to do with 0.2% increase in inflation. Well, we wouldn't want to trouble ourselves. So we have a lot to say about that. And of course, the right wing is out there defending the motherland, Russia. So we will get to, we'll get to that as well.
Yeah.
But good news in the second half of the show, some more justice in the George Floyd case, among other things. And a member of the LGBTQ community fights back in an effective way. We love that. All right, Casper, take it away.
All right. Vladimir Putin has officially launched a full-scale attack on Ukraine. The invasion involves attacks by land, sea, and air, and he has already killed dozens of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians. The official death toll, of course, is constantly changing, but as it stands right now, it is in the dozens, if not hundreds. Now, Putin announced the invasion in a speech and then went on to issue a threat to any country that would dare intervene. So let's take a quick look at that video.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции. Ее цель – защита людей, которые на протяжении 8 лет подвергаются издевательствам, геноциду со стороны киевского режима. Кто бы ни пытался помешать нам, а тем более создать угрозы для нашей страны, для нашего народа, должны знать, что ответ России будет незамедлительным и приведет вас к таким последствиям, с которыми вы в своей истории еще никогда не сталкивались.
So as you can see at the end there, he threatens to retaliate against any country that dare intervene in this invasion. He, of course, doesn't refer to it as an invasion, even though it is a full-scale invasion. And in the beginning there, of course, he's gaslighting everyone by indicating that he's doing this to protect people. He's not protecting anyone. As I mentioned earlier, there's already, there are already lives lost as a result of this. This is not something that's contained in the breakaway portions of Ukraine. This isn't just about the annexed portions. He has launched a full-scale attack in several different cities across Ukraine. And obviously, I want to take a quick moment to note, I personally underestimated what Putin was willing to do. And I didn't rely on what Putin was saying. I relied on the intelligence community within Ukraine that was really downplaying the threat. And also, you can't really blame me for being skeptical of our Pentagon and State Department, but I miscalculated here. And what Putin is doing is obviously something that we're 100% against. And this is a terrible update and terrible news, which I have more details of in just a second.
Yeah, so real quick on those fronts. So every aggressive dictator, totalitarian leader, etc., says, I have to protect the homeland. They never say, oh, I'm starting the war. They never say, oh, we're the guilty ones. Oh, I'd like more territory because of my shortcomings. I want to make up for it because I'm insecure. They never say the truth.
Of course he's not gonna say that.
Okay, he's not gonna get out there and say that, no.
Can you imagine the humility?
Yeah.
I am feeling insecure, so I'm gonna invade Ukraine.
Yes, I have shortcomings, I have physical shortcomings, and I try to make up for it by invading more countries, taking more land, and getting a lot of other people killed. So they're not gonna tell you the truth. They always say, I'm protecting the homeland. I had to protect these people that were in that territory. They were asking for my help. It's exactly what the Germans did when they took Sudetenland, etc. Okay, exactly what they did. So now, second of all, Putin is threatening everyone else, and we're going to talk a lot more about that because he has some real threats. First of all, obviously he's got nukes. That's a hell of a threat, and he's beginning to wink in that direction, which is super scary times. And then he's got 40% of the energy going into the European Union. So that is a massive threat, and we have not really responded that well to it, in my opinion. We're not strongly enough. Now, in terms of who's at fault, let's just cover that one last time here at least. we told you, and for my part, I thought that America was needlessly antagonizing by constantly saying that we could put Ukraine into NATO and pushing up against Russia's border. I thought that was a mistake in the beginning, and I thought that Putin was trying to basically push back against that, right? Well, he was. That is a mistake. We were too aggressive, but he went further.
Yeah.
And the actual invasion means that even if we had said, oh, we're not gonna put NATO in Ukraine, he would have invaded anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That was another miscalculation. I felt that there was some credibility to his security concerns, but I'm now understanding more and more that there likely wasn't any level of diplomacy that would have prevented this from happening.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, even when it comes to authoritarians and horrible people like Putin, you always, well, at least I always assume that at the end of the day, they're motivated by incentives and disincentives. And there are so many disincentives involved in invading Ukraine. And I know that you have a theory on this, Cenk, which you'll get to in just a second. But let me give a few more details, if you don't mind, in regard to this invasion, because it might inform, what you think about what's going on or why Putin has decided to do this. For instance, he has decided to take over Chernobyl, as is reported. It was reported earlier today. The Ukrainian advisor to the Ukrainian president said, it is impossible to say the Chernobyl nuclear power plant is safe after a totally pointless attack by the Russians. This is one of the most serious threats in Europe today. And some Russian military massed in the Chernobyl exclusion zone before crossing into Ukraine early on Thursday. A Russian security source said, Russia wants to control the Chernobyl nuclear reactor to signal NATO not to interfere militarily, the same source said. So that's relevant because, as you guys can recall from the video we showed you, Putin issues this threat, and having control over Chernobyl means that, he could use that to essentially threaten all of Europe if he manages to break like the concrete containment that's been built around the nuclear reactor, which is meant to protect people from radiation and all of that. Well, he could cause actual damage and harm to people. Like that is a serious threat, and he's doing this to kind of amass some leverage.
Yeah. So look, I think that it's fair to say at this point that American intelligence was right. I think we were very right to question it. It has earned questioning. Besides which, you should always question the government. That's the job of reporters. And the whole world is right to be skeptical of it after Iraq and so many other failures of US intelligence, which were largely on purpose. But in this case, now looking back at it, it looks like they were right. The Russians did amass 190,000 troops. They were intending to invade all along. And I'm now absolutely convinced based on the facts. And so if people say, hey, wait a minute, are you pro-Russia or anti-Russia, pro-America or anti-America? That's nonsense talk. The question is who's right and wrong based on the actual facts on the ground. And so the American intelligence said that Russia was going to invade almost no matter what. And basically that's what happened. And now guys, why do I say that? Because if they were just worried about Ukraine being in NATO, they could have taken so much less severe, drastic actions. Then you could have continued the negotiations and he could have gotten the result that he was looking for. The French were already headed in that direction. They likely were going to give him the result that he was looking for if that was his real aim. But he did not go down that path. He purposely chose a path that was far more belligerent, and it made it obvious in hindsight that all of his talk about, oh, I'm just worried about my own security, golly gee, was always a front and a lie. He had intended to invade all along, because you do not take this kind of massive drastic action unless you've game planned it all the way out.
Right.
Now, some people are clowns and they act with it before doing an end game, but Putin is not among those people. Putin is very smart.
Yeah, and let me also add that in recent days, Vladimir Zelensky made it clear that he was going to drop any intentions in joining NATO. He referred to it as a dream, like it's probably best that we don't do this. I'm paraphrasing. Joining NATO is a dream, And so it didn't. That made it clear to me in retrospect that this wasn't really about Ukraine joining NATO. And so what is the real intention here? So one more graphic and then I wanna go to your theory, Cenk. Now, the New York Times reported this: while the ultimate goal of President Vladimir Putin and his generals remained unclear, American officials assessed that the end game was likely the decapitation of Ukraine's government and the replacement of its president, Vladimir Zelensky, with a Russian-controlled puppet regime. And so it's kind of being thought of as Russia's way of trying to rebuild like that Soviet bloc. And I just felt like, again, the economic interests that Russia may have really run counter to that. But Cenk, you have a theory that kind of goes against my thought. So what is it?
Yeah, so Putin's playing chess, and he's playing a very dangerous game, not just for the whole world, obviously specifically for Ukraine, but he's playing a dangerous game for himself because he's pushing all in here. So how does it play out, and why is he doing this? So he has a couple of great hole cards, if you will, in the poker analogy. He's got the nukes, so you can't attack back against Russia too aggressively because you're taking a certain percentage chance with total human annihilation. That's a hell of a card to have in your deck. Okay, now secondly, he has 40% of the energy that goes into the European Union. So if you cut off the gas and the pipeline that goes in there to show the Russians that you mean business with real tough sanctions, well, Europe's gonna be in a world of trouble. In fact, prices from today, based on what they were a year ago in Europe for that energy, has gone up tenfold. So already Europe is suffering significantly because of this conflict. So Putin's gamble was, the other side is weak. They don't have unified leadership and they're obsessed with money. They're not gonna wanna cut off their own money because a lot of people in the West make money from Russia. Whether it's bankers who, and some of our top finance people here in America that launder Putin's billions, I mean billions on top of billions. You think they don't care about that? They care a lot about that. The oil companies that are now making money hand over fist, and of course economic impact like inflation. So he thinks the West is too sensitive. They're gonna be too worried about the stock market and their inflation and the money that they're making, the very, very rich people in America and Europe are making off of Russia. And so they're not gonna wanna be too aggressive. So now if he pushes them around, takes Ukraine, now he knows his own country is gonna get hurt, but he's figuring that the sanctions are gonna be weak. And so far, he's been right. The sanctions have been relatively weak for all the reasons that I just explained. So he thinks I can withstand those sanctions, and then once I have Ukraine, well, it's already over. What are you gonna do? Invade back to take Ukraine? What are you gonna do? Cut off Europe's oil supply for how many years? You're not gonna do that. I'm gonna take Ukraine, then things are gonna normalize, and then we're gonna go back to business as usual. And then once I've taken Ukraine, I know I can take whatever I want and you're not gonna do anything about it. Now, if it goes south on him, what would happen is his economy is hurt so badly. If we did really tough sanctions, the oligarchs get their money cut off, then they're mad. And if that lasts long enough and they're in enough pain, not the Russian people, he doesn't care about them at all, but his power base, which is the oligarchs in Russia, and they turn around and go, Vlad, it's enough. This is too much pain and it's not worth taking, especially if he gets bogged down in Ukraine militarily. So that's the gamble. But as I lay it out for you, you begin to realize it's not that bad a gamble for Putin. If he loses, he could lose everything because he can get pushed out in his own country by the other power centers, the other wealthy people in Russia. But he figures he's got his bases covered, and I'm starting to worry that he's right.
Yeah, and I think that it's evident in the response that we've seen from Joe Biden, because Joe Biden responded to this invasion. He gave a speech earlier today, and in that speech, he announced some new sanctions. However, he is not banning Russia from SWIFT, which is essentially the global financing system, and so that was a little questionable. but more importantly, he decided not to sanction Vladimir Putin specifically. And so it seems as though there's a lot of fear in what Putin can do, not just in Ukraine, but what this could mean economy-wise for the West. And so that worries me. And Putin apparently has done a calculation and realized that he has some leverage here, which really does put not just Ukraine, but European countries, former Soviet countries at a massive disadvantage. And I'm terrified to see how this is gonna play out. But with that said, why don't we move on to Biden's response and talk specifically about the sanctions and what this all means. So, President Joe Biden issued a speech to the American people this morning in response to Russia invading Ukraine. As I mentioned earlier, Russia has launched a full-scale invasion in Ukraine, including by land, sea, and air. And as Biden had promised, he is going to implement some new sanctions. The question is, how effective will these sanctions be? With that said, why don't we take a quick look at his address and then I'll fill in the blanks.
We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen to be part of the global economy. We'll limit their ability to do that. We're going to stunt the ability to finance and grow the Russian military. We're going to impose and we're going to impair their ability to compete in high-tech 21st century economy. We've already seen the impact of our actions on Russia's currency and the ruble, which early today hit its weakest level ever in history. The Russia stock market plunged today. The Russian government borrowing rate spiked by over 15%. In today's actions, we've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets. We've cut off Russia's largest bank, a bank that holds more than 1/3 of Russia's banking assets by itself, cut it off from the US financial system. And today, we're also blocking 4 more major banks. That means every asset they have in America will be frozen. This includes VTB, the second largest bank in Russia, which has $250 billion in assets.
So that sounds like a big deal, but there are major sanctions missing from what Biden is announcing there. So number one issue is that for some reason, Biden has chosen not to sanction Vladimir Putin specifically, and the US has not blocked Russia from being part of SWIFT, which is the global financing system, right? The way that financial transactions are done globally. That is referred to as the quote unquote nuclear option. No pun intended, because we're dealing with the nuclear power here. But why? Why did he make that decision? And will the sanctions that he announced in that video be effective enough in getting Russia out of Ukraine? Look, we'll see what happens. But I do think it's important to understand how Wall Street lobbying in the past has actually weakened the potential effectiveness of these sanctions. This is reporting from the Daily Poster that I think is really important. Let me just go through some bullet points real quick. Biden faces a significant obstacle, they write. Corporate lobbyists' success in shrouding the American finance industry in secrecy, which makes it far easier for Russian oligarchs and their business empires to evade economic sanctions. Law enforcement officials and sanctions experts have been sounding ever louder alarms over or about weak transparency and disclosure requirements, specifically in the most opaque corners of the economy. Private equity firms, hedge funds, shell companies, and investment vehicles such as real estate funds and art assets. These are the things, guys, that these Russian oligarchs are laundering their money in. And so you can talk a big talk about these sanctions, but if you have these pro-Wall Street, anti-transparency measures, then they're not going to be as effective. And if this is what you're going to rely on to try to persuade Putin to pull out of Ukraine, I don't think it's necessarily going to work. Also from the Daily Poster today, according to the oil and gas lobbying group, the American Petroleum Institute, what the country needs to be focused on right now, meaning the United States, in the middle of this humanitarian crisis, is securing energy security at home and abroad by expanding more oil production, right? The United States is the top oil producing country, but this is the catch. They also are calling on the US government not to place sanctions on Russian oil and gas production.
Yes, so guys, the efforts that we've done so far in sanctioning Russia, most importantly their oligarchs and Putin, are mediocre. They're not super weak. If they were super weak, the Russian markets would not have gone down about 1/3 of their value. That's a significant blow, okay? But are they really strong? No. If we did the strongest sanctions, they'd have been knocked out already. And so it is fascinating that they have not done that. Because you have to understand that in modern warfare, yes, there's bloodshed, as we're seeing now, already dozens of Ukrainians killed, and cruise missiles, etc. But it's mainly a financial battle. And so Putin has calculated that he is in good enough financial shape that he could withstand the battle, and that he thinks that the West is too weak to put on significant sanctions against them. So let's lay out why we have not done the strongest sanctions, including unbelievably, not even touching Putin himself. No, come on, that part is obviously weak. Well, I mean, Putin has invaded and he is 100% responsible, but we don't want to offend him. Are you kidding me? Is this a joke? I mean, when are you going to offend him? When he takes Germany? So, all right. So why is America not acting more forcefully? There's several reasons. Number one is Europe's hooked on Russian gas and oil. They just are. It's 40%, and they don't. And they're super worried that if Russia cuts that off completely, or more accurately in sanctions, the Europeans cut off their access to Russian gas, that they're gonna have significant issues. They're gonna have heating issues, they're gonna have pricing issues, and it's gonna massively affect their economy. And Putin knows that. He goes, you wanna do it? You wanna do it? They're in a game of chicken. And right now, the West is saying, no, we don't really wanna do it. So that's point one. Point two is, we're worried about, and get a load of this, these are real numbers that Goldman Sachs came up with. We're worried that if we take stronger sanctions, that it will affect inflation by 0.2%, and the GDP by 0.1%. 0.1%. Now you're telling me Vladimir Putin calculated wrong? We're worried about him, and we won't take actions against him because we're worried about a 0.1% drop in GDP. We're hooked on short-term money.
Yes.
Oh, we got to get to 15% every year. The stock market's got to go up. The GDP's got to go up. GDP can't go down. 0.1%. We can. Okay, no, don't lay a glove on Putin yet. Okay, point three. What Anna read to you, American Petroleum Institute. Now they're like, oh, good, take advantage. We sell more oil to Europe. That's great. But we don't want to destabilize the oil markets, and we don't want oil sanctions. That is very dangerous to our business. And we donate a ton of money to American politicians. So they tell their politicians in America, heal, and they do.
Yep.
And then the last point is the one from Daily Post that Anna mentioned first. The most powerful people in this country are guys who run private equity funds, hedge funds, etc. If you don't think money is the real power, you don't know anything about politics, okay? So those guys, some of them, not at all of them, but enough of them are laundering Russian money.
Yep.
You think Putin is gonna invade and risk all of his hard-earned money, hard stolen money from all these years? No, the minute he invaded, I was like, oh, his money is 100% hidden. We're never gonna get to it. And the hilarious thing is, it turns out he hit it with us. And think about how smart that is, because then that hooks the richest people in America to be his top defenders.
Yes.
So that's why we're not doing strong sanctions. That's why he's still in SWIFT. That's why we haven't touched Putin's actual accounts themselves. If Biden wanted to, he says he could pass a law. In fact, he could do it with an executive order and say, hey, you know what? Right now, there's a rule that protects all those private equity guys and the money that's going into them and keeps it secret. He could easily say they're no longer secret.
Right.
You have to at least tell the government, right? He's choosing not to do that because he doesn't want to offend the bankers.
And understand, the sanctions that are being implemented are unlikely because of these secret banking and secrecy laws that Wall Street lobbied so hard for and accomplished, the sanctions that are being implemented are going to impact who the most, Cenk? The Russian people, as opposed to the oligarchs, as opposed to Vladimir Putin, as opposed to the people who are either aiding and abetting or carrying out this humanitarian crisis that's now underway in Ukraine. And that's exactly what we don't want. We don't want innocent people to suffer. We want the bad actors to suffer. And so this is corporate rule. This is how corporate rule ruins everything, including any type of humanitarian mission we might say that we want to be part of. I mean, come on.
By the way, this is also not new. Part of the reason that we didn't go into World War II quicker as millions of people were being murdered was because a lot of our bankers had deals with the Germans. So they didn't want to burn their Nazi allies. That's literal, that's historic, you can read up about it, okay? So American bankers said, whoa, I'm gonna lose money if you go into Germany. Let a couple more million people die because I don't want to lose any money. And from recent history, last example, in 2018, we actually did go after a Russian oligarch. Turns out he had cornered the aluminum market. And so when we put sanctions on him, aluminum prices spiked all across the world. And when they did, they put the fear of God into Western markets and Western politicians. They're like, whoa, we gotta be really careful about sanctioning Russian oligarchs because it could affect us 0.1%, and we can't have it. So we learned all the wrong lessons from that, and the Russians and Vladimir Putin specifically learned a lesson. Oh, these guys can be pushed around. And that's what he's doing right now.
Well, we got to take a break, but when we come back, we have more updates on this crisis in Ukraine, including how Donald Trump and the right wing has responded to it. Come right back.
All right, back on TYT. So I'm gonna start with Super Chat first. History Speaks wrote in, TYT, please take a moment and show love to the real anti-war movement, by whom I don't mean well-paid American anti-imperialists spinning for Putin, but the thousands of Russians protesting war in the streets and being arrested and beaten. I love that you wrote that in, and yes, absolutely. Those brave souls in Russia standing up against imperialism are heroes. And yes, we've got our frauds here in America who all of a sudden don't care about civil rights or imperialism. When Russia's doing it, what a coincidence. In fact, History Speaks wrote in again saying, anti-war East celebs, Aaron Mate, Tulsi Gabbard, Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Gray Zone, etc., are claiming Putin's war is all the West's fault. But Putin's stated rationale for today's invasion made no mention of NATO. He spoke of stopping quote unquote genocide and denazifying Ukraine.
Listen, when I had that bonus episode moment where I flipped Aaron Mate the bird, there's a very real reason why I never apologized for it, and I proudly have that photo of me flipping him the bird all over Twitter. I love that picture. He deserved it. I stand by what I said, and he's proving me right every single day. So thanks, Aaron. I appreciate it, clown.
100%. And by the way, as usual, the same with Tulsi Gabbard, and it was right first, and everyone's like, oh, what award-winning journalist. And now all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, wait a minute, this is weird. Why does Gray Zone love imperialism when it comes from Russia? Turns out she was right again, years before everybody else. All right, let's go to YouTube members. In fact, we got a new one. Carito, thank you so much for joining. We appreciate it. You just hit that join button below the video. Max Moraski, aka Prison Mike Dragon, writes in, thanks for bringing the truth, TYT. Much love from Wisconsin. I'm going to our members here on our site. Gabby Marita said, where the hell's the UN with everything going on with Ukraine over the past months? Isn't this crisis literally what the United Nations was created to deal with, or are they just weighing themselves into the League of Nations status again? Gabby, of course they are, but to be fair to them, it's very hard because America's worried about its own bankers and oil companies. And yeah, okay, we're talking tough, but we're not walking tough. And then China is saying, I don't know, maybe I want to take Taiwan. I'm neutral. So the UN Security Council cannot act because of Russia's in it and China's in it. So it's tough. Wyman said, so the right defends Putin, but we on the left are commies? How does that work? Well, we're gonna get to that in the next story because that's a hilarious and unbelievable irony. Tatiana in Japan said, I normally can't watch TYT live because I have students in my classroom, 8 a.m. in Japan. However, today I have to make an exception and just put in my headphones to listen to what's going on. I hear you on that. Things are perilous at this point, unfortunately. And then Tradora on Twitch said, I've been avoiding news coverage because it's so damn depressing, but I need info and there's nowhere else I trust but TYT. Thank you, much love, we'll be right back. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. All right, Anna's got more news.
Well, our very own Cenk Uygur was trending on Twitter today because he apparently triggered the right wing with a simple tweet. Let me read that tweet to you. He says, right wing doesn't love Putin just because he's an authoritarian, tyrannical leader. They love him because he's a white authoritarian leader. Race has become more important than even nationality. They've turned on democracy and now even America in favor of a white warlord. Now that immediately led to all this backlash because let me tell you something, the one thing the right wing doesn't like is you telling them exactly who they are. It happened when I said I was better than the racists that were, comparing Leslie Jones to Harambe the gorilla. They didn't like the fact that I called them out on their racism. So every time they want to come at me, they're like, are you better than me? I am better than you. I'm saying it again, go cry about it. But anyway, Cenk, I thought that your tweet was fine. I think that the reason why some people have a knee-jerk reaction to it is because you do have some elements of the Democratic Party weaponizing race to their advantage all the time. But in this case, I think that you actually have a lot of credibility in that argument. And we have receipts to show you. Yeah. So
I mainly care about the receipts, but guys, the culture wars are so prevalent now. Trump started it by saying, "Oh, Putin, I like Putin. Putin's a good guy, right?" Yeah. And Trump had a personal financial interest in it, and his sons have said it many times, not related to his presidential campaign. Whether it was related to his administration is a different question, but his son said well before he even ran for president, we get all of our money from Russia. So there's a reason why Trump has a personal affinity for Putin. That was the beginning. But now Tucker Carlson didn't have to do it, and all the other right-wing pundits and media figures didn't have to do it. They're all choosing to celebrate Putin in different ways. And so I was wondering why, what a weird turn. It's Alice in Wonderland. It's upside down world. The right wing used to hate the Soviet Union and the goddamn Ruskies, the Russians were the worst. They're the ones who did the Red Scare. Now all of a sudden they're like, oh, Putin is strong and wonderful and oh, it's just so great, right? You're like, what the world happened? And they are desirous of a white leader who takes charge and is a strong man. And mainly, you remember the right wing never cared about democracy. And they showed it on January 6th, but they've been showing it our whole history. They were like, oh, democracy and equality for black people? No, we're gonna do slavery, then we're gonna do Jim Crow, and we're gonna make sure that they don't have equality for hundreds of years. Who did that? The right wing did that. They've never cared about democracy. They just wanna be in charge. And when they see Vladimir Putin pushing people around, they're like, there's a good white guy pushing people around, not taking any flack, not doing any of this woke nonsense. Go get him, Putin. That's why, because their identity has become not American, but white.
So we have examples for you. So here's a quick mashup of videos featuring prominent right-wingers filleting Vladimir Putin. Let's watch.
Putin ain't woke. He is anti-woke.
The Russians, people still know which bathroom to use.
They know how many genders are there in Russia?
2.
Since the day that Donald Trump became president, Democrats in Washington have told you have a patriotic duty to hate Vladimir Putin. It's not a suggestion, it's a mandate. Anything less than hatred for Putin is treason. Many Americans have obeyed this directive. They now dutifully hate Vladimir Putin. Maybe you're one of them.
And I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of the Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful.
Also remember the t-shirts we saw at Trump rallies. I'd rather be Russian than a Democrat.
Has Putin ever called me a racist? Has he threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with him? Has he shipped every middle-class job in my town to Russia? Did he manufacture a worldwide pandemic that wrecked my business and kept me indoors for 2 years? Is he teaching my children to embrace racial discrimination? Is he making fentanyl? Is he trying to snuff out Christianity? Does he eat dogs? These are fair questions, and the answer to all of them is no. Vladimir Putin didn't do any of that. So why does permanent Washington hate him so much?
They don't have boys swimming in girls' college swim meets.
How backward.
It's embarrassing.
How savage. How medieval. How medieval. This is why this whole thing's a scam.
So there you have Erik Prince and Steve Bannon talking about how awesome Putin is because he doesn't believe in treating people who are different than they are, or have different lifestyles, different identities than them as equals. You have Tucker Carlson listing off all the things that he loves about Putin, including the fact that Putin has never accused him of being racist.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that, but part of the reason we brought up the tweet is because in so many of the responses from the right wing were, oh yeah, can you show one example? That's outrageous to say conservatives like Putin.
Yeah, we can show you examples.
We just did it.
Yeah.
Receipt upon top of receipt on top of receipt. Now I want to break down what Tucker said, because understand this, they do a scripted show. His script is in the teleprompter. He wrote it ahead of time. His producers wrote it and sanctioned it, and so did the executives. Executives look at scripts on cable shows. They did when I was on MSNBC, okay? So everybody's on board. And he bothered to write it down, it wasn't off the cuff. So the first thing is what Anna mentioned. Putin's never called me a racist. Now, why did he write that down? Why did he want to send that message? He's saying, remember, the Democrats are the bad guys because they're not the same race as us. And they call us racist, and it makes us uncomfortable just because we don't want them to be equal to us. On the other hand, Putin has never called us racist, and he doesn't mind us being in charge. He knows how to take charge. And then you go to Steve Bannon and Erik Prince, they're like, Putin knows who to target. He's not gonna let any gay people get away with anything or even allow them to be, and he's gonna regulate on bathrooms. He's not woke. They're cheerleading for him. Why? Because he's kind of a white right-wing hero to them. Look at this shirt that the guys were wearing in that picture. It's not about two randos. They're getting that because right-wing media is giving and feeding them that, and that's why those shirts are made in the first place. It's symbolic. I'd rather be Russian than a Democrat. Why? Because in their minds, Democrats are the others. They're minorities. They're blacks, they're brown, they're Asian. And so I'd rather be Russian than a Democrat because their identity has become super focused on their race. And so that's the oldest right-wing trick in the playbook, right? They've been doing this for hundreds of years. One more. It was super curious that he said, does he eat dogs? Why did he write that? What is that in reference to? Are Democrats trying to get you to eat dogs? That's not a thing that's been in the news at all. No, that's a reference to Asians. So he purposely put an anti-Asian sentiment in there to say, remember guys, Putin is white, Democrats are black and brown, and Asian, we don't like the Asians either. We like strong white warlords. And everybody cheered. Thunderous applause in the right wing.
Yeah, look, I'm tired of people behaving a certain way and then throwing temper tantrums when others judge them based on the way they're behaving. So they proudly spew their hatred, homophobia, xenophobia, racism, whatever it is, day in, day out. They have proudly made that their identity. And then when something pops off and they get called out on it, they just get together and have their simultaneous Twitter meltdown over it. Have a meltdown over it. But whatever you think about Cenk as a person, he was 100% right in that take. I remember when Putin really started getting attention among the right wing in America, and it was around 2012. And I remember it really well because around 2012 was when Putin started implementing all of these anti-LGBT policies in Russia. It was also around the same time he took that insanely goofy photo shoot, shirtless on a horse and all that stuff. And I remember Fox News like salivating over it, like, oh, he's so strong. He's so strong. Now, did they look at those flabby pictures of him on top of a horse and think, wow, he's so strong because of that? No, they thought that because of the fact that he was hateful, openly discriminatory, and didn't care, was unapologetic about it. They loved it. And if you want to deny what this is really about, if you want to deny why the right wing in America is so supportive of Putin, this is why.
Look,
sorry.
Soon they'll get to a point where they'll say, oh, the left is just trying to cancel Putin.
Whatever.
Their defense is unbelievable. So look, I have half tongue in cheek said, pushed hashtag Anna was right on Twitter a lot because she called what Tulsi Gabbard was going to do 3 years before she did it, or in the middle of her doing it. She noticed the things that she was trending towards, and everybody was like, oh, it's outrageous. She's such a good progressive. No, Anna was right. Tulsi Gabbard was always actually a right winger, and she was faking it as a progressive. She was right about Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, Gray Zone. She was right about all of it. So on this one, I don't mind hashtag Cenk was right. I don't mind it.
You were right.
Okay, and so these guys, one thing else I have to mention, now back to her being right, but guys, it's important for you to know, we're not just saying it like, haha, we were right. This is a matter of massive importance. They're turning half the country against America and our allies. And they're literally supporting our enemy that is attacking our ally. It is unbelievable, right? So it matters who's right and wrong. So that's why I say Anna was right about the LGBT issues. In fact, TYT Investigates tracked Marina Butina, who turned out to be a Russian spy, and many Russian delegations being invited to the National Prayer Breakfast. The National Prayer Breakfast, maddeningly still attended by Democrats. It's insane, but run by right wingers, and run right now solely funded by Franklin Graham, who's a very right-wing evangelical leader in America. They kept inviting Russians over when? After Putin started taking the LGBTQ stance against them, right? And our Christian leaders, so-called Christian right-wing leaders here in America were like, oh, finally somebody's looking to crush gay people. We love it. And then the prayer breakfast sent out delegation after delegation to other countries to encourage anti-LGBTQ laws in those countries using American politicians to do that. So they've been working, parts of the right-wing movement in this country have been working with hateful Russian leaders for a long time now. So in a sense, this is the culmination of that, where they get to come out of the closet and say, yes, Putin is our hero. And they're in the middle of doing it right now.
Well, one of Putin's biggest fans, of course, is Donald Trump. And when we come back, we will share a moment of confusion for Trump while he was talking about this crisis in Ukraine on the Laura Ingraham show. You do not want to miss it.
Dementia.
Come right back. We've got that and more.
back during the social break here. Let me go to Super Chat again. There's so many of you commenting there, and thank you for doing that. Molly Mall wrote in, the right equates strength with capacity for violence. Remorse, guilt, and humanity is equated to weakness. Unfortunately, that is so true. They think if you show empathy or compassion or humanity that you're weak. It's just a different way of thinking. And it's hard for us to understand one another. Our brains are just structured differently. They think, oh, that guy's being nice. What a loser, how weak. The way you show strength is by taking advantage of other people and oppressing them and dominating them. So I don't know how we're ever gonna get along. All right, Jeremy Justice writes in, Putin's going all in with a straight flush. Sure, it can be beat, but the odds aren't in our favor. The Queen of Hearts weeps for Ukraine. So look, don't give up on it yet, because there are a lot of different economic interests throughout the world and a lot of political interests, but the economic interests matter more, honestly. So this could get protracted, and it might depend on the literal military fighting in Ukraine and how long it takes. So the tables can turn on Putin. He's not guaranteed to win here at all. I still think it's a near 50-50 proposition. So I know he's much smarter than our leaders, and he does act more boldly, and that is a huge advantage. But he might have gambled too much here. We'll see. We have no idea. We'll see how it plays out. Diana Vaccarelli says, word for a family member in the Army Special Forces Delta in Japan. Do you think China would follow Russia and invade Taiwan? Not yet, it looks like, because China's starting to edge towards neutrality. They seem to be more pro-Russia. I was a little surprised at how neutral they tried to sound today. And apparently there's a power struggle where Premier Xi is going to go for an unprecedented third term and might not want to upset any of the balance there as he pursues that. Otherwise, I was worried they could take Taiwan any second. While we're distracted in Ukraine, what in the world's gonna stop them from taking Taiwan? So, but that's not off the table, it's just delayed, and God knows when they'll get to that. Izzy Sanchez said, I have a theory the whole Trump-Putin meetings were probably planning this invasion, and Trump pushing to break up NATO during his presidency is also connected. These are scary times. Izzy, I wouldn't go that far, because Trump's such an idiot, as you'll see in the next clip. He's just mainly worried about his own money. And so planning an invasion that far out, and Putin wouldn't tell Trump. Trump's too stupid, and Putin knows that. He's like, this blabbermouth will go say it on Fox News. So that's my thought on that. And new YouTube member Nancy Roth, thank you, Nancy. Wonderful to have you as part of us, and we'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. More news.
Well, Trump has decided to continue his ongoing pro-Putin campaign with a pretty gross speech at Mar-a-Lago. And he also continued criticism toward Joe Biden while posturing as someone who would somehow take a tougher stance on Vladimir Putin, which is hilarious. Now, he went on Laura Ingram's show, and not only did he continue to spew some pro-Putin nonsense, he also made a fool out of himself by getting real confused about which country is invading which part of the world. Let's watch.
We're just learning that US officials are looking at a potential amphibious landing now in Odessa, Ukraine. Again, a month ago or 3 weeks ago, all the so-called experts were saying that Putin was probably going to just be content with staying in those separatist regions. But I think given what's unfolded, sadly, with a lot of weakness in the United States, they just decided to go for it. I mean, it looks like they're going for it. And where does that leave NATO, the NATO alliance?
I think you're exactly right. I think that's what happened. He was going to be satisfied with a peace, and now he sees the weakness and the incompetence and the stupidity of this administration. And as an American, I'm angry about it and I'm saddened by it.
President Trump, we actually have, just hold on, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we have, we're going to the Pentagon, I believe. Ukraine, sorry, Ukraine is speaking at the UN. now we basically have the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations looking like a defeated man. Your final reaction?
Well, I think the whole thing, again, would have never happened. It shouldn't happen. And it's a very sad thing. But you know what's also very dangerous is you told me about the amphibious attack by Americans. You shouldn't be saying that because you and everybody else shouldn't know about it. They should do that secretly, not be doing that through the great Laura Ingraham. They should be doing that secretly. Nobody should know that, Laura. And, you know,
that was the Russian. Those are the Russian amphibious landing.
I thought you said that. I thought you said that we were sending people in. Oh,
no,
okay.
I did not. No. That would be news.
No, but he didn't think that Laura Ingraham said that the United States was doing that attack, because immediately after she announced the attack, Trump responded to it by pointing out how weak Biden is, and if it weren't for this incompetent administration, Russia wouldn't be doing this. So at some point in the middle of that segment, he either completely forgot about who did that attack or just decided to like throw the truth out and move on with some other talking point. I don't know what that was, but
I know what it was.
But I think he just forgot. I think he literally responded to the Russian attack immediately after Laura Ingraham mentioned it, and then forgot that it was Russia that did the attack later in the segment.
It's called dementia, and so I don't know if it's what particular ailment that he has, mental ailment, but he clearly has one. And guys, your only other explanation, if you're a right winger, no, he didn't get, he's not a bumbling old fool. He didn't get confused. He thought that Laura Ingraham had said that it was the Americans who did an amphibious landing. Now, break that one down. You think the former president goes on a talk show and finds out there that the Americans are in an actual battle with Russian soldiers? That would be massive news. That wouldn't be a little news. That would be gigantic news. He doesn't even know that. He thinks like, oh yeah, I might have found out on Laura Ingram's show. Like if I was on Laura Ingram's show and she said the Americans have landed in Ukraine and are fighting the Russians, I'd be like, when the hell did that happen? That's insane. Oh my God, we're gonna go to World War III. That's a normal reaction. And I was never president. He was the president of the United States.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, American amphibious landing in Odessa. Yeah, that makes sense. What? No, okay, so your best excuse is, no, he's the dumbest man alive and doesn't realize that that would be a massive development in world news. Just doesn't even get it. Like, oh, maybe she just mentioned it in passing.
Yeah, I mean, and also it reveals how little Trump really cares about this very issue. Every single time he's talked about it, he's used it as an opportunity to point out that he believes the election was stolen from him in 2020, and this is the ramification of him not being in charge. In every single interview I've seen on this matter, that is what he does. He immediately pivots to, the election was stolen from me, and this is what you get when I'm not in charge.
But by the way, look, so on a normal
all the other details are irrelevant to him. Like,
yeah,
he doesn't care.
But guys, if you've had loved ones that go through this, and I feel terrible for almost anyone but Trump going through this, because he's got 40% of the country following him when he's lost his mind. What people going through this kind of mental decline go through is a lot of different symptoms, and one of them is constantly going back and talking about the same thing over and over and over again, and being obsessed with themselves, telling stories about themselves over and over again. I mean, Trump already was a nuclear level narcissist, but when you've got the mental decline, sometimes people get further detached from others and get into their own world. And so that's what Trump does in every interview. Like, okay, now back to me, we're gonna have World War III. He thinks, not us, but he thought in the middle of that interview, Russia and America might be in a hot war where they're firing against one another, which endangers the entire planet. And he thought, back to me. And about how I was a victim here. Well, we're talking about Ukraine. Oh, the election, the rigged election.
It's always about him.
Yeah, that was another part of the interview. And it's now gotten so embarrassing. Did you notice why we kept that part in the clip? Laura Ingraham went to something else. They went to a Ukrainian diplomat talking while the former president was on the line.
Yeah, I know, that is pretty breathtaking.
Yeah, because they're like, oh, it's clown Trump.
Yeah.
He's calling to cry again.
Yeah.
He's not gonna talk about this issue. Our audience likes him. But hey, you know what? Diplomat XYZ, the undersecretary is talking. Let's go to him because this guy's a national embarrassment.
It's totally true. In fact, look, we obviously, because of time, we had to shorten the video and we cut out the diplomat portion of it. But when I was choosing the time codes for that video, I was like, we should include some portion of this guy's speech. But it wasn't good.
No, it wasn't that relevant.
It wasn't really. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, they cut away from Trump to go to this guy. It's a little weird. And they stayed on him for a while.
For a long time. It wasn't like, hey, they went for 30 seconds, came right back. It was almost like they were trying to run the clock out on Trump. Get him to get off the phone. And by the way, she couldn't do it. And then he comes back and he's like, oh, I can't believe the Americans have gone ambidextrous against the Russians, okay? And at the end, she laughs at him. She's like, no, that would be big news. Oh my God, get him off. Get the senile old fool off. Now, we would never think of people in that terms, but she's a right winger. She probably does. She probably thinks, oh, he's got dementia. We hate him now. Move on. Go back to the Ukrainian undersecretary of the undersecretary.
Right.
Okay, we got to get the former president off the line because he's so deeply embarrassing for the right. And last thing is, guys, if Biden made that mistake, what do you think the entire right wing would say? Dementia.
And they do.
Right? They say it all the time. So when Trump says it, they're like, oh, no, I follow him only. He's my beloved hero. He doesn't even know what planet we're on or which country is attacking which, but I love him.
Well,
okay, that says a lot about you, doesn't it?
Well, we do have a pretty amazing story on the show today involving a new poll. This is Republican voters. They were asked, who do you prefer, Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis? And Trump is losing his credibility among Republican voters. So
that is in some polls, and that last one was in Florida, but it is indicative. People are, the decline unfortunately did not begin with any of his idiocy or his actual dementia or whatever that is, or any of his horrible, horrible statements. They love that stuff. The decline in his polling began when he said he took the vaccine. Let's be honest about that. And now DeSantis is surging, and in a poll in Florida, beating Trump. So now Trump is flailing even more, apparently furious about DeSantis, furious about everything, especially about the 2020 election.
Right.
And I think even Republicans, even diehard Trump supporters are starting to get a little tired of the endless crying.
I mean, who wants that? Who looks at a man who cries incessantly about being a massive loser and thinks, I want that guy to be my leader? It's pathetic. I mean, I want to believe that Republican voters have some standards.
Yeah, remember the thing they're most obsessed about is appearing strong. Not actually being strong, but appearing strong. Right. And so when Trump looked strong, they loved him, but now he looks weak. And in the beginning, they thought he was a martyr, but now they're just starting to see him as a victim. And remember, most of them still think the election was stolen, but even so, how long are you going to cry? And that is why now Trump is slipping.
All right, well, we got to take a break. When we come back for the second hour of the show, we've got more news for you, including some pretty great updates in regard to the other police officers involved in the murder of George Floyd. A jury has handed down their ruling on these guys. And then later in the show, we'll talk about that poll regarding Donald Trump versus Ron DeSantis. Come right back.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like, tyt.com/join, and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitsing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on. She
doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream,
but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members.
Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing. I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a young tourist viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet. What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, aka Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
And this is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. Referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT? Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Dr. Rashad Richard. We got a lot happening today. But what do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable.
Rashad, great to be here. Congratulations on the new show. And I gotta let everybody know that Rashad and I go way back.
Here's the pattern that we see in all of these Karen stories. They think they own stuff they do not own. Now, where does that come from? I don't know, maybe slavery. Maybe they think they should still own black people.
This is what happens when Karens weaponize the police.
When you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression.
It hits you in a certain way when someone is holding you against your will, treating you like you're a criminal and you're an innocent person. This is something that black people face no matter where they are.
A stronger black economy lends itself to a stronger, greater economy. Don't think it's exclusive of you, it's inclusive of you.
What's your beef with critical race theory?
It adds more fuel to the fire of the racist tendencies that we already have.
We have a generation of problem solvers that can remedy the problem if they are properly taught what the problem is.
You know who created redlining in this country? The white liberal.
I don't give a damn who created it. If it's a racist policy, Shelley, here's what I don't know. I don't know. See, there you go filibustering, brother. You're scared of this truth, but you're gonna get it, though.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's gonna be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader.
All right, back on TYT. I'm gonna read one comment from Twitch here. Ambiguous Samus writes in, love that Anna is consistently right on her takes, and Cenk too. Very much appreciated voice, which I hope continues to get stronger and stronger.
Thank you.
That's very nice of you. And of course, as I read that, Trump was like, is America going ambiguous or is it Russia? I can't tell. Amphibious, Trump, amphibious. Okay.
Yeah. I probably shouldn't get into it, but I really hate that I miscalculated Putin and his willingness to invade.
Oh,
look, like obviously it's a prediction, and I'm not gonna get my predictions right every time. But like, this is what sucks about having a government and an intelligence community that you don't trust because of how many times they've lied in the past.
Yeah, 100%.
It sucks. Like when you don't have faith in your institutions, yeah, it leads to these kinds of errors, and I apologize for it, but like I hope people don't blame me for being skeptical about US intel.
You wouldn't be doing your job if you weren't skeptical about US intelligence. And guys, that's to me that's not at all important. What's important is what are the actual facts? And do you then bury the facts because you're insecure and can't say, hey, I miscalculated on Putin, right? Or you say, oh no, guys, it turns out these are the facts, and you should know that. And so we all miscalculated Putin, and it turns out he was going to invade all along. That's how you know someone actually cares about the news and about getting it right.
Yeah, getting it right, because like the idea of people walking around with misinformation in their heads that I'm responsible for makes me feel terrible. Like I would never want to be responsible for that.
Meanwhile, almost every part of American media thinks, oh, people are walking around based on misinformation I gave them. Wait.
Yeah, it's
right.
It's pretty
I
sick.
did my propaganda job right. No, the news actually matters. Facts matter. Logic matters. All right, let's do more news.
All right, well, we've got some non-Russia related news I want to get to. So let's talk about the latest update in the murder of George Floyd and the ramifications for the cops involved in that. The 3 former Minneapolis cops who were on the scene as George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin have been found guilty of violating Floyd's civil rights. This is a breaking news story, and I'm glad to see that there's even more justice in this situation. And this involves 3 cops, former cops, I should say, Tao Thao, J. Alexander Queng, and Thomas Lane. Here's what we know so far. A federal jury in St. Paul, Minnesota, consisting of 4 men and 8 women, found Lane, Queng, and Tao guilty of depriving Floyd of his civil rights by showing deliberate indifference to his medical needs as former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on Floyd for more than 9 minutes on May 25th, 2020, which of course ultimately killed him. Derek Chauvin was convicted of murder in that case. Now the jurors also found Tao and Queng guilty of an additional charge of failing to intervene to stop Chauvin. Lane, who did not face the extra charge, testified that he asked Chauvin twice to reposition Floyd while restraining him, but was denied both times. Now, in regard to the defense, the argument was that Derek Chauvin was their superior, that he was the veteran police officer and the others had to defer to him, and because of that imbalance of power, they felt like they couldn't tell him to stop. But luckily, that defense didn't work, and the jury did find them guilty of violating Floyd's civil rights. Now, here's what their roles were, what they did, what they were doing on the scene as Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd. Queng and Lane were the first officers to respond to the Cup food store on that day after reports that Floyd had tried to use a counterfeit $20 bill. They later helped Chauvin restrain Floyd. At that point, Queng held down Floyd's torso and Lane held his legs. And Thao held back a group of bystanders, shouting at the officers to get off Floyd. And then during cross-examination, Lane said he started CPR about 5 minutes after they found that he didn't have a pulse, adding that ideally, CPR should be started immediately after a pulse cannot be found.
Ideally, yeah, of course. Yeah. What's the point of doing CPR 5 minutes after you don't have a pulse? It's insane that they didn't do it right away. So look, guys, this is a big, big moment and really good news for justice, because all my life, cops like this would have never been convicted. I'm not sure that Chauvin would have been convicted of killing George Floyd for most of my life. But the 3 cops who were there but didn't actively kill Floyd themselves, including one that asked the other cop to get off of Floyd a couple of times, convicted, that would have never happened. And so the tide has begun to turn. There's a lot of bad news that we note, but we should also note the good news and give you right context at all times, right? And so, and by the way, Lane asking Chauvin to get off Floyd a couple of times made a huge difference for him, because he did not get convicted of the second charge. So he's gonna do, presumably he's gonna do a lot less time than the other 2. And so being a little bit of a human being makes a difference. And Lane was also the first one to try to give him CPR way too late. But one of the main reasons why they would have never been convicted for all my life is because the jury would have said, and the judge would have instructed them, the whole system would have said, well, I mean, that's a supervising officer, that's a senior officer. Once a senior officer gives you a command, all other officers must allow the murder to happen, right?
And look, that is the culture in police departments across the country.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And so, but when you have convictions like this, it begins to change the culture.
Yes.
Because it gets into the cops' heads. Maybe I shouldn't let a supervising officer murder someone right in front of my eyes over the course of 9 minutes when I could stop it.
Maybe I should.
Because I might go to jail.
Right, maybe I should speak out and stand for justice and actually protecting and serving, even if it means that there could be retaliation, right? Because yeah, you might be risking that retaliation, but what's far worse is dealing with potential prosecution and conviction like these guys did. And look, this isn't over for them. According to CNN, the three will also face a state trial in June on charges of aiding and abetting in the killing, which was pushed back so the federal proceedings that we're talking about here could take place. They have not pleaded guilty to those charges, meaning they haven't taken a plea deal. We'll see how it plays out. And when it comes to their sentencing, clearly, they haven't been sentenced yet. The jury has found them guilty today. This is a breaking news story. But their sentence could range anywhere from imprisonment up to a life term. However, it's unlikely that they'll be sentenced to life for this because the guidelines do indicate that the judge could have some discretion on the sentencing here. So we'll see how this all plays out. But this isn't the only trial that they're facing. They also have that trial in June.
So remember, Chauvin also had a state and federal trial, and on the federal charges, he pled guilty. He took a deal and is likely going to get about 25 years. Now he was going to get that time from the state anyway, so that's why he took the deal. But that's a big punishment. Could be worse. I think he should go to prison for life. But that's another big moment for justice. Ahmaud Arbery's killers being convicted a couple of times. Big moment for justice. But I want to end on one last thing that Anna mentioned. If Lane hadn't just said, hey, can you get off his neck? I don't think that's a good idea. And instead, when Chauvin did not get off his neck, Lane had made Chauvin get off his neck. And how would he make him do it? Physically, right? There's no other way to do it because Chauvin's not listening to him. I guarantee you Lane would have been severely punished by the rest of the police.
Yeah.
Because then Floyd would not have died. It would not have been a big controversy. Lane would have been a secret hero, but in the police department, he would have been considered just the worst heretic. What kind of a monster. He might have been fired. Like, you pushed a supervising officer off of a suspect? How dare you? He would have been severely sanctioned if not fired. I guarantee it.
All right, well, let's move on to another cop-related story. This time, someone who was a union boss who stole money from the union. It's amazing. So, former NYPD union boss Ed Mullins, he's in a bit of trouble. He was suspended after he surrendered, let me start that again because he wasn't suspended. So former NYPD union boss Ed Mullins surrendered to federal authorities yesterday following charges that he had actually stolen up to $1 million from the New York Police Union.
So guys, I would just want to make clear, as we're going to give you the details here, this is one of the worst guys in the country who kept saying, oh, cops are awesome. No one should ever question cops, and we should get to profile minorities, and we should get to do everything we want. And the other guys are soft on crime.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he's been stealing from his own officers, from the union of the officers. They paid dues into that union, and he stole from them. He's been the real criminal all along. Meanwhile, high and mighty, I am a right winger. Yeah. And the minorities are guilty, and we need to crack down on them.
He's protecting his checkings account and serving himself, duh.
Yeah, well, you'll see in the details.
Yeah, the details are pretty amazing. Now, the Manhattan US attorney issued a statement about this case saying, as alleged, Edward Mullins, the former president of the SBA, abused his position of trust and authority to fund a lavish lifestyle that was paid for by the monthly dues of the thousands of hardworking sergeants of the NYPD. Mullins submitted hundreds of phony expense reports to further his scheme, stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from the SBA. That's the Sergeants Benevolent Association, the union that he stole from. Now, hundreds of thousands of dollars doesn't even really describe it. He stole $1 million. Like, let's keep it real. And here's what we know about it so far. So Williams said Mullins defrauded the union by using his personal credit card to pay for meals at high-end restaurants and to pay for clothing, jewelry, home appliances, and a relative's college tuition, among other things. Mullins then submitted false and inflated expense reports to the SBA. Between 2017 and October of 2020, Mullins sought reimbursement for those bills as legitimate SBA expenditures, when in fact, they were not. So let's give you a few of these items that he had filed expense reports for. For instance, if the actual cost of a meal was $522.55, which is like, what is he eating? Where is he eating?
First of all, he shouldn't be charging that at all.
Right.
That's his personal meal.
Can you imagine?
It's not like a bunch of sergeants went out and they had like a massive meal at a diner and it was hard. That's his personal, unbelievable bill to begin with, let alone the extra fraud he's gonna do on top.
Yeah, yes, Jack, I had a nice lavish dinner at Mastro's Steakhouse. I just need you to sign off on this expense report.
Like she's saying, if that happened here.
Yeah, right? No, I mean, it would be a joke, no way. Anyway, but let me continue. If the actual cost of the meal was $522.55, Mullins would seek reimbursement from the SBA for $822.55 and pocket the difference. In April of 2021, Mullins charged a $45.92 charge to an $845.92 charge at a wine bar in New Jersey, a $609.89 charge to a $909.89 charge at a steakhouse restaurant, and like the list goes on and on. He would, first of all, have insanely expensive meals in the first place, which I feel like that should already be a huge red flag, but that wasn't good enough. He would inflate how much the bill was just so he could pat his pockets a little bit afterwards. He's like, a little steak, a little lobster, I'm really enjoying myself, but I'd like a little cash too. So let me go ahead and file an expense report that inflates how much I spent for this lavish dinner so I can, take home some money as well. Insane.
So the funny thing is he's not giving in the receipts because he can't. So why bother changing $45 to $845? Like, you could make up any number. Well, you could make it 800, you could make it 900. You're not giving the receipt because the receipt says $45. And we know because the investigation showed he didn't give the receipts. In fact, he started the crime spree when they changed accountants or something like that. The person who was supposed to keep track of the receipts didn't ask him for receipts. He's like, yes, I finally get to steal as much as I wanted. Remember, this guy is the head of the cops union. The one who said that he was irate at the left wing, huge Donald Trump supporter, of course. Irate at the left wing because they weren't stopping crime enough.
Oh, okay.
Meanwhile, at the same exact time, not later, at the same exact time, he's like, give me the Bob's dues and Joe's dues and Susie's dues. All of my fellow cops, I'm gonna steal from them. By the way, why is he a Donald Trump fan? Because like Donald Trump, he's a con man. And so he thinks that Donald Trump's a really successful criminal. I would love to be a really successful criminal like him.
Right.
Donald Trump has stolen, I don't know, billions. With all the money that he's defrauded his investors and et cetera. He's like, I only stole $1 million. I'm just trying to catch up, okay? He criticized Bill de Blasio's daughter for attending a Black Lives Matter protest because that encouraged criminality. He stole $1 million from his fellow cops. But that is the right-wing mind. He thinks, yeah, of course, I'm allowed to steal anything I like. I get to rule over you. I get to take your stuff. That's law and order. I take it. Oh, a black guy does something? A criminal, because in his mind, he's guilty for being black, not for doing something wrong. And he's innocent, even though he did something wrong because he's white.
By the way, I mean, he was collecting 2 salaries. Part of that had to do with being a full-time union boss. The other part, serving in the NYPD, serving
himself in the NYPD.
Yeah. So in 2020, Mullins made more than $220,000 between those 2 jobs, and then he was also stealing from the union that he was, the leader of. Like, the greed is amazing to me. It's amazing. There's no end to how greedy these scammers are. It's absolutely disgusting. Now, what does this all mean? Well, he is charged with 1 count of wire fraud, which carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. After he pleaded not guilty at arraignment, Mullins was released on a $250,000 personal recognizance bond. Under the terms of his release, he was ordered to surrender his passport and turn in his weapon. So,
oh wow, are they not merciful? Why is this guy out of prison? This guy is a notorious criminal.
Yeah.
I mean, if some guy on the street steals $50 and he can't afford bail, he'll sit in prison for years. And you're gonna give this guy bail? Give him 20 years. Look, you have to prove your case. You have to show that he actually did it. If he actually did it, there's no reason why this notorious criminal shouldn't get at least 20 years.
All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we might have some breaking news for you. And we'll also talk a little bit about a representative in the state of Florida who's standing up for the LGBTQ community, which is being targeted by right-wingers in the state with this Don't Say Gay bill. We'll be right back.
All right, back to the social break here. Lots of news happening right now. Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville, which is one of the dumbest guys in Congress, and that's a hell of a title, just did a speech on the floor of the House talking about how communist Russia is invading Ukraine for farmland. God, they're so stupid. God, they're so dumb. Communist Russia.
Our team of super producers also have some amazing shots of Ted Cruz from CPAC, which we're gonna get to for our members. Do not miss that bonus episode.
tyt.com/join.
Yeah.
Okay. Members get more, members get it first. Okay, speaking of programming notes, we're doing a State of the Union and Texas primary coverage. They're both happen to be on the same night. That's next Tuesday, March 1st. That's a big night. So after the Young Turks, stay right here. We're gonna do hours of coverage on State of the Union and Texas primaries. Jessica Cisneros is in a very important primary. By the way, friend of the show, Jaime Camille, endorsed Jessica Cisneros and made a video for her.
I love it.
Yeah, he's just a wonderful guy for doing that. And that is a district that loves Jaime Camille. So that actually could make a big difference. And I love that he was a strong progressive who did that for Jessica. Go help Jessica right now if you can, and especially if you're in that district, you could already vote. In fact, if you're anywhere in Texas, you could already vote. So make sure you're voting for progressives in primaries. Super important, and check out our coverage on Tuesday night. All right, and speaking of things that are important that we're doing, we did a petition to make sure that the victims of sexual assault don't have their DNA used against them. We asked you guys to participate, and you're amazing, and you have. So there's another update. One of our Viewers went and asked Sacramento Police Department, as we did with the LA Police Department, and she got confirmation that they are not, will not use the DNA of sexual assault victims against them at a later date. I love how you guys are taking action. Go get the updates, take action yourself at tyt.com/petitions. That's fantastic. And don't forget to make sure that you're checking out Watchlist, our new show too. That is JR's show. It's youtube.com/watchlisttyt. Make sure you subscribe, that's really important. And check it out noon Eastern at 9 a.m. Pacific every day. And a shout out to the Progressive Boomer who just joined on YouTube. Progressive Boomer, you make this show possible. Thank you. Hit the join button below or tyt.com/join. We'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Forward.
All right, let's get to our next story out of Florida.
What topics specifically about people like myself, LGBTQ Floridians, are not appropriate to teach in the classroom? Is it topics about how LGBTQ people love one another? Is it topics about our marriages, which are legal in the United States and in Florida? Is it conversations about our families?
I ask that you not ask questions or answer questions in ways that are personal to other members. We've had a great substantive conversation today. Members have been talking about bill lines and places of the bill and questions. I ask that we keep our questions to the substance of the bill.
No party loves censorship more than the Republican Party. And in that case, you just watched Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith, who is Florida's first LGBTQ lawmaker, rightfully criticizing Florida's proposed Don't Say Gay bill. Now, House Speaker Chris Sprowls, the Republican, is the one who told him to keep his questions to himself, because apparently those questions challenge what the GOP and the state want. They don't like being challenged, so they want to shut it down. I think it's worth watching the full exchange. Let's take a look.
What topics specifically about people like myself, LGBTQ Floridians, are not appropriate to teach in the classroom? Is it topics about how LGBTQ people love one another? Is it topics about our marriages, which are legal in the United States and in Florida? Is it conversations about our families? What part of conversations about people like myself are not age appropriate?
Members, this isn't a direct response to anything Representative Smith said, but I just want to caution all of us, because I understand we're having conversations where we all feel personally about the topics for a variety of different ways. I ask that you not ask questions or answer questions in ways that are personal to other members. We've had a great substantive conversation today. Members have been talking about bill lines and places of the bill and questions. I ask that we keep our questions to the substance of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, thank you for your guidance before. I'm going to do my very best to comply, to not make my questions personal. But the bill is deeply personal, and I'm trying my very best, Mr. Speaker.
So that, the video ends with him getting emotional, and it's a powerful video, especially because he's not only just standing up for himself, but standing up for all of these Floridians who will be victimized by this proposed legislation that, make no mistake about it, is being proposed only because the Republican Party has nothing to offer you. Nothing. Nothing more than fear, nothing more than manufactured culture wars, which does end up hurting innocent people, okay, including people in their own state. But Are they gonna make your life better economically? Of course not. They love the corruption, they love the greed, they love to rig economic system that they get to take advantage of. Are they gonna do anything to improve your life? No, but they will serve up fear, they will serve up this garbage. And like this, don't say gay bill. We've talked about it on the show before. It's more of the same that we've been seeing across the country. I mean, yesterday, Texas Governor Greg Abbott put out a directive indicating that parents with transgender children could be investigated if their children are suspected of having sex change operations, which doesn't even happen. It's a way of preventing transgender kids from maybe getting some of the medical help that they're looking for, things like that. It's just a way to like sow fear and hatred among their constituents because they've got nothing else to offer. And my question to people who keep voting for these goons over and over again, do you feel better about your life? Do you feel good about yourself? Like, is this something that makes you feel like you're actually being led by people who have your best interests in mind? I just don't get it.
Okay, so.
And all politics is personal. Don't give me that garbage. All politics is personal. You know why? Because politics is about policy, it's about leadership, it's about decisions that impact your life, especially on a local level.
Yeah. So let me be clear. First of all, is this personal? Yeah, they're saying there's something wrong with you, and we don't want our kids even knowing about people like you. It is the definition of hate. And what's particularly galling, guys, is that they then say, hey, but don't ask the other representative who would like to ban your existence anything personal about his opinions, because it might offend him. You say my very existence is so horrible that you don't want to expose children to it. But if I ask you a question, that's gonna hurt your feelings? That's too personal? That's too personal. Why? Because they think you don't matter, I matter. So I can pass a law saying that people should hate you, and we shouldn't even ever teach kids about you because your very existence is so terrible that we wouldn't want to expose kids to it. But you asked me a question. How dare you? How dare you offend me? I wouldn't have listened to a word of that. I understand that he's got to abide by different rules, and I love that brother for giving the speech that he gave, right? But then they ask us for tolerance.
Yeah.
Then they ask us for tolerance. Shut up. Okay, Anna, hold on one second. Okay, Trump says in 2016 campaign, I want to ban all Muslims from the country. The Republicans cheer, yes, ban the Muslims, and they elect him. They elect him in the primary, they elect him in the general election. Then they say to me, oh, don't make it personal. What do you mean? You said you would ban me, I'm a Muslim immigrant from Turkey. I'm atheist now, but I wasn't when I immigrated. And they don't ask for, oh wait, are they atheists? What's their personal opinions? No, they're like, we hate all Muslims and we want to ban all of them. I'm not asking you their opinion. You come from a Muslim country and you're Muslim. We despise you and do not want you in the country. We think you're all guilty, all of you are guilty. What, why are you making it personal? They say, why are you making it personal? No, people who believe that are bigots.
No, it's worse than that though. The Republican lawmaker there who shut it down, he's a coward, right? Because you're endorsing this legislation. So why don't you be a tough guy and explain in his face why it is that you think that this is answer his questions. If you're championing legislation, you should be ready and willing to answer any and all questions about it. You should be able to stand up for it. But he shut it down because he's a coward. And he doesn't want to have to answer those questions.
So that chair I don't know what his position on this bill is.
He's the speaker, I think,
yeah,
right?
So, but that guy thinks, offending every gay person in the state is irrelevant. I don't know them, they have no power, and I hate them. They're at a best case scenario, no matter how he's voting, he thinks all of you are irrelevant, okay? But you're questioning one of the elites? One of the people in this esteemed institution? How dare you, dear sir? Don't make this personal. Okay, Republicans that vote for things like that hate gay people. Why are we having a debate? And because the right wing will say, I don't want to ban anyone learning from something as terrible as being gay, but I'm not anti-gay, and let's have a debate about it. I'm not having a debate. You're a hateful prick. You're a terrible person. You're a terrible person. Oh, I want to ban all Muslims. Oh, but you can't call me a bigot because my feelings will get hurt.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Are you, how stupid are you that you can't understand that simple argument? And then people will say to me with a straight face, oh, name one thing that Trump did that was racist.
But I think what's transpiring among Republicans across the country, whether it be these anti-CRT crusades, the Don't Say Gay bills, the anti-trans proposals, all that stuff, it's even worse because do a lot of these Republican lawmakers hate the disenfranchised groups that I just mentioned? Yeah, I think that they do. But I think that there's a significant portion of them who are actually pretty indifferent to these groups. But what they do, because they have no other choice, like they have no other option, they have nothing else to offer up to their constituents. They have nothing to use to pander to their constituents. So what they do is they choose people who are powerless, people who have been discriminated against historically, people who have been treated poorly in society. They literally go after the most powerless people in order to fearmonger and pander to their constituents. Whether they hate them or not is irrelevant. They use them, they exploit them for their own political purposes. You see that happen with reproductive rights all the time, all the time. That's why you'll have people like Donald Trump who, when he wasn't running for president, had no problem with abortion. I mean, the same thing happened with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, when he was governor of California, he actually expanded access to abortion. And then once he realized that, hey, I can get in bed with the evangelical vote and it'll be politically advantageous, he was on the mission to ban abortion.
Yeah.
And that's super relevant. A lot of the garbage that takes place among the Republican Party, especially when it comes to taking rights away from people, is about pandering to the worst elements of society because that's the only thing they can do. That's all they can appeal to. What else are they gonna offer up? Policies that would actually improve your lives? No, they're not gonna do that. That would actually take courage. That would actually take leadership. That would take a spine. And the very so-called strongmen, the tough guys who claim that they're so tough and we're gonna protect national security, we're gonna do this and that. They can't even stand up for their own garbage legislation. They have to shut down questions about it.
So this is when people catch feelings. I don't care, I'm right, they're wrong. Anyone who votes for a Republican is a bad person. Republicans are the only ones trying to pass anti-LGBTQ laws all across the country. All across the country. It used to be bipartisan, it isn't anymore. Democrats don't pass any of those laws and they fight those laws. Democrats have a lot of problems, but that ain't one. Republicans say, we hate gay people, we hate gay people, we hate gay people. You vote for a Republican, you are allowing them to pass laws that hate gay people. That means you're a terrible person. And he's right, that representative's right. Say what's wrong with him, go ahead, say it. You don't get to ban teaching about gay people at all. You don't get to wipe away their existence. Then come around and go, no, I don't want to be put on the record and say what's wrong with you, because then I'll seem like a bad guy. You know why? Because you are a bad guy, and anyone who puts a Republican in power is a bad guy. Right now, the entire party is toxic, filled to the rim with bigots, homophobes, and racists, and they pass laws like that day in and day out. And by the way, if you're not in the LGBTQ community, you know what we do as progressives and decent people? We fight for someone we don't know. You fight for our brothers and sisters. You fight for our gay brothers and sisters. We fight back together. We don't ever let these monsters deny our existence, no matter who we are on this side. We stick together, we fight together, and we don't accept the conventional wisdom in America, which is you can say anything you want about minorities, you can say anything you want about the left, you can say anything you want about people that have no power. But if you ever say something about the powerful, oh, you're offending people, you're making it personal. I don't give a damn. Yes, I'm making it personal. You're a terrible person if you believe that. A terrible person.
And just to add weight to what you're saying, Cenk, about how this is what the Republican Party is. This is pretty breathtaking. More than 170 anti-gay or anti-LGBTQ bills have been proposed by the Republican Party, by conservative state lawmakers last year, already surpassing last year's 139 in total. At least 69 of them centered on school policies, according to Freedom for All America. So they've been tracking this. So again, more than 170 anti-gay bills in less than 2 months since the start of this year.
So in 2 years, over 300 anti-gay bills, all by Republicans, the party of hate. That is a fact. It's a fact. It might be an inconvenient fact for some of you who say, oh, well, yeah, I know, but I like tax cuts and I'm greedy, and I like to hate. Okay, but it's a fact. Just admit it. And yeah, goddamn right we should fight back. And we're not gonna have tolerance for their intolerance. No deal, no deal. I don't care what person in power yells at us. Don't ever accept their bigotry, their homophobic actions, etc. We fight back. They are immoral. They have less morals than us. We have to fight back against evil, immoral people like that.
All right, when we come back, we're gonna show you a conservative candidate who apparently doesn't believe in respecting the cops. It's an incredible video, don't miss it. We'll be right back.
Back on the social break here. There's so many comments. I don't know how I'm going to get to all these. Okay, Yeet Woodmax says the Polish border is still open. This is on Twitch. Reports were spread that it was closed due to confused people. Ukrainians looking to flee can escape to Poland still. Please share with anyone you know in the area. Well, I'll tell you what, guys. So the Republicans hate refugees. That we showed you a clip the other day. Someone here in LA saying, "Oh, I don't want Afghan refugees. I'd rather take care of dogs." Ukrainian refugees, America will take them in right away because they're white. So they won't have any problems at all. They'll say, oh, at least we got to take in their refugees. Come on, right? And I get Fox News will say it. They're in favor of Putin, but Ukrainian refugees, all those good white folks coming in, oh, they'll take them right away, okay? Drink That OJ gifted a sub, Tempo Dan gifted a sub. Queen Mother Dragon wrote in, 10 months in and I've never felt more at home with a community. Keep the fight going, I'm with you, thank you. We appreciate it. Baker Troublemaker says Zelensky's begging to join NATO. 137 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed and China has aircraft in Taiwan's airspace with Navy ships heading that way. So guys, I just read the story a little bit, skimmed it about the Taiwan and China. China does go into their airspace every once in a while just to test them. So it's not a unique to this circumstance, so don't over panic about that, but we should be very careful, of course, at the same time. Now, of course, that they've been invaded, now, of course, the Ukrainians say, yeah, well, it would have been nice to be in NATO because then all of us would have to counterattack and protect them. Stephanie Z says, disappointing to learn that Western Europe needs Russia's oil. I guess Europe isn't as advanced as we thought. with green energy. And that's a point that Anna was going to make earlier in the show. We didn't get to it because we ran out of time, but we wouldn't have all the stupid oil and gas problems, and we could actually protect Ukraine if we'd already gone renewable. So yet another disaster brought to you by the oil companies. Lars Nilsson writes in on Super Chat, if Putin is so insecure, all the media from now on should refer to him as President Dobby. I got you, but nobody's going to do that, and Putin would probably murder anyone that does. Certainly he would in Russia and sometimes outside Russia. Moondragon wrote in, this from earlier, Anna just made me laugh. The salt dragon strikes again. As she does from time to time, yes. I'm out of time. All right, we'll be back. All right, back on TYT. I'm going to read two quick super chats. British 32 said, I'm sorry, History Speaks said, I'm concerned about the rise of anti-Russian xenophobia. It's important to highlight that most Russians are opposed to Putin's aggression. Contrary to Aaron Monte, who verbatim denied Putin was a dictator, Putin is. So whatever
He's amazing.
Yeah, of course.
He's incredible.
No, Aaron Monte is the fool who said that the elections were Bashar Assad, a dictator in the middle of a civil war, got 95% of the vote. He said, no, that could be legitimate, yeah. He went to go look at the elections. He was there in Syria, 95%. Journalist, hilarious. Guy loves dictators who are on that side. Anyways, but the reason I read that tweet is, guys, always, as with progressives, so obvious, but I'm gonna say it anyway. This isn't about Russians. This is about Vladimir Putin and his oligarchs and their greed. Obviously, the Russian people are wonderful people, just like anyone else, the most obvious thing in the world. And Greg Edmond wrote in, TYT, thank you for embracing the science of truth by admitting when you made a mistake. That is true strength. Thank you, we appreciate it. We actually care about the news and getting things right. All right, Anna.
All right, well, let's talk about, wow, that is quite a photo. Conservatives claim that they believe that police should be respected, especially if they're pulling you over for a traffic stop. You should listen to them, you should respect them, you shouldn't give them any lip, you know? But there's this one Republican House candidate who did give a police officer some lip. Let's take a quick look at how that went down in Florida.
The reason for the stop, you were observed going 57 and a 40, and you were on your phone texting while you were doing that. That was at Euclid and Fruitville.
You don't need to point at me, officer.
I'm not pointing at you, I'm pointing in the direction where it was.
I'll just call the chief, sir.
Go right ahead, sir. Can I see your license?
I am, right?
Yes, sir, I do. Can I see your license, registration, insurance, please?
You can do this?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry? I still have a job to do, sir.
Yeah, what's your name?
Officer Veskin, it's going to be on the citation. Can I see your insurance, registration, and your license, please? Sir, can I have your paperwork, please? 7 years, sir. Can I see your registration, please? You're not going to give me your registration, sir.
You arrest me?
I'm asking you if you're going to produce me with your registration. You don't have it on you?
Look, go call the chief. Tell him how rude you just been to me. Play with this video.
Okay.
Then you call Marlon Brown. Then you call the mayor.
Okay.
They're not okay, though. I'm telling you what to do.
Okay, sir, are you refusing to produce your registration? I'm asking you if you have your registration.
You're making career decisions.
So the man in that video, the person who was stopped and was giving the cop a hard time, is Republican House candidate Martin Hyde. And if you thought that was bad, it actually ended up getting far worse in the exchange. Before we get to that video though, Cenk, do you want to weigh in on what you've seen so far?
Yeah, so there's so many amazing and outrageous things here. Look at the sense of entitlement. So he says, do you know who I am? He's just a House candidate. He's not a congressman. Yeah. First of all, if you were a congressman, it still wouldn't matter.
Yeah, for real.
Right? But, and by the way, he's doing terrible in the polling. Now, I would know a thing or two about that. I was a House candidate that didn't do well in the polling. So it would never occur to me being in the same exact situation as him, it would never occur to me to say to a cop that pulled me over, do you know who I am? But he thinks, how dare you? I'm a Republican, I'm white, I'm a right winger, and I'm a candidate. How dare you pull me over? And he says, you sure you want to do this? And then, I mean, flippant, he said, you're gonna arrest me? And later he takes off his seatbelt, he's reaching for his glove compartment. If a young black guy said to a cop, you're gonna arrest me? And he takes off his seatbelt and reaches for the glove compartment, he's probably dead, okay? And look, the cop did a great job here. Give her credit.
Super calm.
Calm, applied the law. By the way, that's how it should go in every instance, okay?
Yeah.
So I commend her, but in a normal situation with other cops, if that guy was black, they would have kicked the living crap out of him for not listening to, but he assumes, of course they're not gonna touch me. Do you know who I am?
Yeah,
I'm
the
a right winger.
That entitlement's pretty incredible. I also have a theory about the dynamic between this cop and this congressional candidate. But before I get to that theory, why don't we watch the rest of this exchange where, believe it or not, it gets uglier.
Montreal paperwork?
Is it your Russian immigrant status that makes you talk to people like this?
10-4, 10-6.
Call the supervisor.
14 dispatch, can you have my supervisor respond, please?
Yeah. And then we'll see who goes.
Okay. You don't want your paperwork?
6142, can you be 51 Great Bell Street? You don't have a warrant.
Sir, you're gonna be issued a citation.
Everything you have to say. I'll wait for the supervisor.
So he asks about her background, as you can see in the video and hear from the video. And the officer is Julia Beskin. She's originally from Latvia. She speaks fluent English and Russian, but it doesn't matter. Like, why are you asking about her immigration status?
Because he's a piece of crap right winger.
He is a piece of crap. I get the sense that it goes beyond getting annoyed at the fact that he's being pulled over for a citation. I don't think he likes the fact that there's a woman in a position of power over him. I got that sense. I'm obviously speculating here, but I've just been in situations like that where I've been treated like that by men, and it just triggered memories for me. You know what I'm saying?
So he brings up her race and that she's an immigrant. We showed you a video a little while back where a black guy who was being hounded by a drunk cop said, hey, can you call a white shirt, meaning a commanding officer, that they wear white shirts, they're called white shirts. It has nothing to do with his race. And the guy's like, did you make it racial? And beat the crap out of him. But here's a white right winger, so he says he actually makes it racial. No, he would have gotten dragged out of that car, and God knows what would have happened to him if he was black. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it, and he knows it so much that he thinks I can say anything I want to cops. They're never going to do anything to me. And by the way, what's going on in that police department where that guy was so sure that her superior officers would back him and not her? He kept saying throughout the whole thing, let's see who gets in trouble. Let's see who gets in trouble. Now, because it got so much publicity, they couldn't do anything to the officer because then everybody would have covered it and it would have been obvious. But if it hadn't gotten publicity, I do wonder what would have happened.
Yeah, who knows? I'm glad that there was body cam footage, and I think the body cam footage speaks for itself, right? So if he did try to go after her, I don't think he'd be successful at it. In fact, there was so much backlash to the way he treated her that he later ended up apologizing. But what a clown. What an insanely entitled, fragile clown. You're just being pulled over for a traffic citation. By the way, how do you not have registration on you?
And then, by the way, if he was black and they beat him up or they killed him, they would have said he didn't even have registration. He refused to listen to the officer's commands. He wouldn't listen to her, and he reached for the glove compartment. He didn't have registration. This guy's looked really dangerous, right? But he's white, so nobody ever thinks any of that. Guys, I'm tired of right wingers like this who have an assumption that the rest of us should be assaulted and manhandled, but they can get away with anything.
Yeah.
I'm tired of the rule of law not being applied equally. And again, credit to that wonderful officer who did apply it equally. And one more thing, body cam footage. They say, oh, no, we don't want that because it's going to show cops in a bad light. No, if they're doing the right thing as she was, it shows them in a terrific light. Yeah. See, the body cam footage in that case protected the cop.
All right, a few other facts about this guy because it's relevant. So if you're worried about him going from being a congressional candidate to being a member of Congress, don't worry, he is lagging in the polls. Hyde is currently lagging far behind his primary rival, US Representative Vern Buchanan. As of February 8th, Buchanan holds a 6-to-1 advantage over Hyde among likely Republican voters. Now, when you look at his endorsements, you can see why he's the kind of guy he is. He's gotten endorsements from people like Roger Stone, of course, and QAnon conspiracy theorist and former Trump administration official Michael Flynn. He later, as I mentioned, apologized, not because he actually feels like he did anything wrong, but because there was a considerable amount of backlash. And he said that he's not going to justify his poor temper on that day or attempt to mitigate it in any way. There will be some who will say it's not the first time I've acted out, and they'd be right.
So in other words, he does this all the time.
Yeah, he's like, I am a professional piece of crap. It's like, yeah.
But by the way, in a Republican primary, he just increased his chances of winning.
I don't think so.
No, look, man, he's got name recognition he probably didn't have before. And for right wingers, you have to understand they think differently than us. They will not perceive that as standing up to a cop and how dare he. They will perceive that as fighting for freedom.
All right, let's get to our final story in the main show. So, CPAC kicked off today in Orlando, and we have some surprising new information about how Republican voters in Florida feel about a potential 2024 race, in the primaries between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. It's widely believed that if Trump wants to be the Republican candidate in 2024, it's definitely going to happen, but that's not necessarily the case. So this new poll from the University of North Florida Public Opinion Research Lab suggests otherwise. So registered Republicans were asked about a hypothetical 2024 presidential primary between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. When asked which of the two candidates they would vote for if the election were held today, 44% said that they would vote for DeSantis, while 41% indicated a vote for Trump. 2% said someone else, 7% didn't know, and 6% refused. I like the 6% that refused. They're like,
yeah, I'm not going to give that information to the deep state. You're crazy. Okay, they'll probably go for Trump. Okay, no, but seriously, we got drums. Trump ain't gonna like that. We told you that earlier, and then we were right, and we showed you the report. Insiders saying Trump is now starting to get furious at DeSantis. Wait till he sees this, because before DeSantis was closing in, but it wasn't that close. Now DeSantis is winning in some of these polls.
He is, and now it's within the margin of error, and I think that's also important. But
and it's Florida, and that's
it's Florida.
Relevant.
Yes, right. That's important as well. But I am curious to see how Trump's incessant complimentary nonsense in regard to Putin is going to sit with the Republican voters. Look, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to feel, because right now the Republican Party is not really united in how to respond to all of it. You have some Republicans who are trying to paint Putin as some communist, and this is really a left-wing thing, which is hilarious. You have others who are still defending Putin in weird ways. I don't know how this is all going to play out.
No, you could know which way the Republican Party is going based on their grifters. So Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, et cetera.
Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson, I would argue that the top grifter in a sense, because he doesn't mean anything he says. He's just trying to find where the audience is. And they're good at finding where the audience is, because that's where the money is. So you leave it to Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson to sniff out where the money is. Oh, right wingers love Putin, we're going Putin. Okay, so whichever way they go, that's the way that the right wing base is actually going. But I don't think that's the primary issue for Trump now, because he's been pro-Putin all along and they loved him all along. So I think the two things that are hurting Trump are he came out in favor of the vaccine, that hurt him big time. So remember, still over 60% of, almost 2/3 of Republicans still think that Trump won the election, that he won it. They're willing to believe anything, right? But they're like, whoa, this guy said that scientists might be right. Wow, they don't like that. And that's when his polls started to decline. And now he's got a second problem. He's beginning to look like a bumbling old fool, like we showed you earlier in the show on the Laura Ingraham show, where he's like, "Oh, America, did an amphibious landing in Ukraine," and she's like, "No, that would be big news." He's just a fool, and he keeps going back to, "Well, I won in 2020, I won." Even the guys who think that he won are starting to get tired of it because he seems like a whiny little bitch, and so he seems weak. And he's going to look weaker and weaker as things go along. When the first polls came out with, DeSantis is at 9, I was like, this is nonsense. Trump totally owns the Republican Party. Now, wow, we got a real question. Trump might not own the Republican Party anymore. Okay, we got an amazing bonus episode for members, tyt.com/join to become a member, including Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, and an NFT goes terribly wrong.
No, not today, not today.
Not today? Oh, well, you'll love that story on another day. Yeah. Okay, all right, hit the join button below on YouTube. We'll see you there.
What's happening? I'm Rashad Richey, host of Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey right here on TYT. Let me tell you what we do on Indisputable. We go beyond the headline. We make sure that you know the full context of the story. And we also highlight issues that are important to the everyday person. We're talking about criminal justice reform. We're talking about the climate. We're talking about what's happening right in your local community. We also highlight very important issues that are affecting all of us, like the economy, jobs, and we engage in transparent debates with people who may not think like me. We're living in a current social atmosphere where opinions are represented as facts and lies are represented as truth. Make sure you tune in to Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey, Monday through Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time.
Hi, I'm John, and I'm new to TikTok, but about 3 years ago, I started my daily political news show, The Damage Report, because I noticed this trend where every morning I was waking up to this tsunami of news that was just generally dreadful and horrifying and shocking, and I thought that if I could spend my time helping people to navigate this, serving as a bit of a life raft, pointing out which news is important and why, there are worse ways to spend your day. We're not an average news show, and we don't want our TikTok presence to be average either, so feel free to let us know what you'd like us to do on the platform, and maybe give us a follow at The Damage Report.
All right, Amazon Prime members, here's how you can subscribe for free on Twitch. Start by linking your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, and then click that little subscribe or resubscribe button below the stream on Twitch. Scroll down and select the subscribe free with Prime button, and then you're finished. Close out immediately and share your little subscription alert with the chat. Send a cute message along with it.